Susan.
Thank you, Claire. Welcome, everyone. So we're going to talk about a commodity code and why do you want one and where do you get it and why does it matter? Because it really does matter a lot. The first thing is to say, well, what is this commodity number that everybody talks about? Well, it is literally that, a number, which is there to describe the goods. So it's there to help everyone understand what is being shipped. Now, why do we need a number? Because every shipment that has ever been has some paperwork with it, either electronically or physically, and that has a goods description on it. Well, I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm not fluent in every language in the world, and neither are all the customs officers. So as the exporter is entitled to make the paperwork out in their own language, and many do, I can't read Russian. I have no idea what it says on the paperwork, and nor would your average UK customs officer, I've no doubt. So how do we get around this? Well, quite a long time ago now, the World Customs Organization, a part of the World Trade Organization, decided that this was a difficult situation for the whole world. It was causing delays everywhere. Nobody knew what anything was. So they had to stop and ask questions instead of the free movement of goods flowing through the ports and airports. And it was discovered that around the world, everyone used numbers, and they were the same numbers by and large, and we could all read them. So they said, let's make a list of numbers. And all the countries who were their members rushed off and made exactly that, a list of numbers beside which was a commodity, an item, a good, next to each individual number. The problem then was that each country had gone and done it by themselves. So what one called called item number 1 was actually item number 20 in somebody else's list and so on. So actually it didn't help in the slightest because we still didn't know what the goods were between countries. The WCO then said this, let's have some order here. This won't do. We're going to publish a list. And they published a list of numbers which they said their members should all use. So forget your own, use ours. And that list was called the Harmonized System Code, the HS code. And that's how these numbers were really born and brought into common use for all transactions. So the HS code is the WCO's own list. And it's a list of numbers, 6 digits long, only 6, against which is an item or a list of items against each number. And we can all look it up. So therefore customs could look it up as well as the importer and exporter and see what that number meant in their own language. And this should stop the problem. Now, it only stops the problem, of course, if people use the numbers and they use them appropriately for the right item, and they use them on the paperwork so that everyone can see what's going on. If you don't put anything down, of course, we're left with the description that we potentially can't read. And I include in the can't read those who like to use product numbers to describe their goods, because I don't know what an IX 1015 plus 10 actually is. What is that, an engine? An aircraft? I've no idea. So we do need some sort of sense here that we can all sign up to. So the HS code, 6 digits, was born. Now that's all very well. This was quite a few years ago now, and people invent new products all the time. I mean, think of the mobile phone. Imagine when that came along. Nobody had ever thought of one of those before. So the list has to be revised. And the WCO do their revisions every 5 years. So we're working at the moment on 2017's revision. The next one will be in 2022. And when they do a revision, it's really just a big index. It's a big listing of items. It might mean that in order to include, let's say, the mobile phone somewhere near where other phones and telephony equipment is, they need to push some items down the list to insert the new item. So every 5 years, it is entirely possible that the number you used to know, which was right for your item, ceases to be right for your item because the list has been updated. And they publish the new list for free. You can find it for free. So numbers don't stay stable, not across after the 5 years. So in 2022, there will be a new list. Some items can have moved up, some will have gone down. and we need to be able to change our systems to match those new numbers every 5 years. So look out for 2022s. You can find it on the internet today. The WCO have published it for us to start working on our systems, which is helpful of them, I think, to give us advance notice. Now, the next thing that happens is the HS code was born, and all the member countries said they would sign up to it. But in order to do so, they have to put it into their own law, which means they go back to their own parliament, the equivalent of our parliament here, and they have to debate the rule, and then they have to agree to the rule in whatever way they choose to do that. Now, some countries are very quick for doing that. HS 2017 came into effect on the 1st of January, according to the WCO. In the UK, it also came into effect on the 1st of January 2017. We adopt them as a rubber stamp. The Parliament still has to sign them, but it is done immediately at midnight. It's not a problem. Other countries don't look upon this with such urgency. And you will find today, because you can look this up, that there are countries out there who are not using HS Code 2017. They are using maybe HS Code 2012 or 2008, the one before that. So we can't say there's a universal acceptance of a single number for a single item, because while many countries have adopted 2017's HS code now, quite a few have not. And therefore your item could be a completely different number in their country. So this is the first thing we have to get over. This is just life in international trade. But when each country adopts this HS code into their law, they often find that it's not sufficient for them. 6 digits doesn't give them enough information. It might say plastic bucket, but they care whether the plastic bucket has a metal handle, if it has a handle at all, or what size bucket it is. Now, 6 digits isn't going to tell them that, it just says plastic bucket. So what they do when they adopt the HS code is they add digits to the HS code. So they will add 10 is quite common in a total number, so they add another 4, or there can even be longer ones, but 10 is sort of average. So each country now, although they're using HS 2017, those that have signed up to that, now has a code that starts with the same first 6, but has a completely different extra 4, because each country adopts their own extra numbers without any relationship to any other country. So the only thing we can say about this code is that it's absolutely likely to be different in every single country. If you find one that's the same, you should probably open a bottle of champagne. But I'm afraid mostly you will not be doing that. They are different in every country, I'm afraid. So we've got to expect that and adapt our systems, our documentation and our processes to account for that, which isn't necessarily that easy, but it is a fact of life for international trade. So that's what the number is, and now where do you get it from? Well, you get it from the internet in most cases these days. Most customs authorities publish their list of numbers for their country online, and in many cases it's free. You don't have to subscribe. In the UK, you only have to look up Google online tariff, and you will find the UK's free online tariff. Now, I've used a different word there. I started out talking about the commodity number. Now I'm talking about the tariff. Well, they are the same thing. But the problem here is that every country has a tendency to call things their own name. So some refer to their whole number, that's the 10 digits plus number, as the HS code, which it isn't. Only the first 6 digits are the HS code, but that won't stop everybody using that in their documentation and in their general speech. They just refer to it as the HS code. People call it the tariff code, and that's generally what I refer to it as, but that isn't right or wrong. That's just a personal choice out of the multitude of names. Some people call it a commodity number, the commodity code, the CN number, the HTS code. Well, the HTS code is the American version. That's what they call it. So you can see that around the world there are many different names for exactly the same thing. this number that describes the goods. So we have to be aware of that when talking to colleagues globally, because we shouldn't be sort of put off by someone in Europe referring to a tariff number. That is the commodity code. That is the tariff number, and so on. So we've got to get used to that. Now, having found the numbers, the big list online for the country of export or the country of import, they are, of course, different lists. Then we have to find our item in this very, very long list. You can imagine it would be very, very long, because think of all the items in the world that there are, and they're all supposed to be listed. So this is going to be a very big list. Well, most of the online versions come with a search engine, for which those of us who grew up with a paper tariff are extremely grateful. It saves turning a lot of pages, I can tell you. But the online search engine also brings with it some difficulties that we don't initially notice. And those difficulties are, you can probably see, I am wearing a pair of glasses today. That's fine. You would refer to them as glasses. I would refer to them as glasses. And why should we not? But if you put glasses into the search engine, UK's one, for instance, you will not get glasses. You will get something like that instead. That's a glass too, isn't it? So why wouldn't the tariff bring up things like that? Or watch glasses. It'll bring up all of those under glasses, but it will not bring these up. Now, why is that? Well, that's because the tariff is written in a language of its own, and this is true in every country, and that is a technical language. To find these, you need to type in spectacles, not glasses. Glasses is actually slang. These are spectacles. And this is true of every item you can think of. You need the technical name, not the common name, not the slang name, and certainly not a brand name, because that won't bring anything up at all. You have to understand that these descriptions are meant to be universal, which is why they're technical, because we all ought to know that these are spectacles and not glasses, didn't we? Might not remember that every time we use the search engine, but I'm afraid if you want to find your correct tariff number, commodity number, you've got to learn to speak tariff. And that involves technical descriptions. Now, that gives us another issue, because many of us expect someone else to figure out the tariff number. We don't know it. I've heard many clients of mine say to me, I have no idea about what my tariff number should be. How am I supposed to know? Well, customs would say that you're supposed to know your product. You made it, or you bought it and are now reselling it. Surely you know what it is. You should know whether that plastic bucket has got a metal handle or not. Who else is going to know but you, the person making the sale or the export? So you're supposed to know your product, therefore you can look through the list and find the right tariff number for your product. Now, if you were a shipper of glasses and all you put down on your piece of paper, your export invoice, your packing list was 1 pair glasses, and you handed that over to a freight agent or a fast parcels carrier who didn't know your company particularly well, what is the person who gets that documentation, who's going to start doing the customs work for you, going to think you're shipping? Are they going to think of spectacles, or are they going to think there's 2 of those being shipped? Now, those 2 things would need different packaging. They may invoke different rules of how you may carry those goods and what you may do with those goods. But how is that person supposed to know? If you don't tell them anything else about 1 pair glasses, they're going to make their own judgment, and it could, and is quite likely to be, the wrong one, especially as they've got a lot of work on and they need to do it quickly. They're going to suddenly think of something and just move on. Which is unfortunate because the exporter is legally liable for the right information to being given to customs, not the wrong information. And when the goods get to the other end, of course, the importer has got to get this tariff code, this commodity number, and find their own equivalent for it. Now, they should know what they bought with a bit of luck, but they may still pick the one for a glass as opposed to glasses, which are spectacles. And the whole thing will be wrong. which is no good because they have a legal liability too to tell customs their correct number. Now, this all gets us into the situation of, well, all right, so we've got to find a tariff number, a commodity code. Why does it matter if we get it wrong? Why does it matter if we put down one for glasses and we actually meant drinking glasses? Why does that matter? Well, the first thing is financial. It matters a lot to the importer because which tariff code you use determines how much import duty you have to pay. Because next to each of one of those tariff numbers, the commodity number, is a rate of duty, a percentage rate of duty in most cases. So if you get the wrong one, the rate of duty for spectacles will be different to the rate of duty for drinking glasses. One may be rather more expensive than the other, which could come as a bit of a sorry surprise if you've picked the wrong tariff code for your item. So absolutely picking the right tariff number drives how much import duty has to be paid. It's not acceptable, of course, to pick a number based on the rate of import duty. That's not the way it's done. You have to pick one based on what the item actually is, and there are even in-depth rules describing how you choose your number, which we are supposed to all be following. It's not really as simple as running your finger down a list and spotting the item. It can be much, much more complicated than that. So you're choosing the rate of duty your importer is going to pay when you put a tariff code down. Now that is clearly very important to the international transaction. It could knock you out of the marketplace by choosing the wrong one because the rate's too expensive. It's not right for your commodity. The next thing it drives is what sort of documentation you need. By picking a particular tariff code, it says what paperwork's required. This could be such as an export license. If you pick an item, you say you just put down one pistol on your paperwork, well, you might expect somebody to ask, do I need an export license? Because that's a gun. This is arms and ammunition. Surely that's controlled. And you might well get lots of questions and delays all about export licenses, when actually what you'd got was a water pistol, and it's a toy, and it doesn't need that kind of license at all. You see, you're already leading to confusion, delay, and aggravation by choosing the wrong tariff code. It can also lead to quotas. This is often the case with fresh food, but it can be with steel and other things, where only so many items or tons could be allowed into a country at a given time. Now, again, if you pick the wrong code and you get a ban like that, maybe you can't import now, when what you had wasn't that item at all. You can also get labeling issues. I could give you another example where what if you put down one horse? Well, someone could think that meant a live horse. Imagine the extra arrangements in the supply chain for a live horse versus what you actually had, which was a child's rocking horse. It would be all the wrong preparations, the wrong documentation. We can so easily get the wrong tariff code by simply what we write down on our paperwork and leaving others to guess what it is when we actually know. But that's making an assumption that what we know is passed to that person who's doing the work for customs, which it usually isn't. So how do we deal with that? And with labeling, of course, if it is a toy, then there's all sorts of things about you have to label it for, will it be suitable for under 3 years old? And are they allowed to chew it? You know, is the paint acceptable, etc., etc. Many more regulations. And this is all driven by the choice of tariff code. So we need to be really careful. But there is still one other financial issue with this. We've dealt with the import duty, which is driven directly by the tariff code chosen. But what about the VAT or equivalent tax at import? Because you have to pay additional taxes, usually some sort of VAT type tax at import. Well, most countries have more than one rate of VAT type tax. We do in the UK. Now, if you are importing to the UK what appears on the documentation as a box of blankets, and you leave it to someone else to figure out the tariff code, they might select tariff code for a perfectly ordinary blanket that you or I might choose to put on our beds. that will get you one rate of VAT, it'll get you 20% VAT. If you were importing, though, actually not the blanket for my bed, but a blanket for a baby's cot, that's 0 rate VAT. That's 20% addition you've got on there for picking the wrong tariff code. So not only the duty, but the VAT as well is driven by the tariff code. So it really does matter which one we choose. Now, at the moment, the UK is not a member of the European Union, but we are still in a transition period in which we're using the European Union rules. Now, those rules mean at the moment that if you are not a VAT registered company, then you don't have to report things to the government in this way. So you don't have to report the tariff code. But if you are a VAT registered company and you do enough trade above a certain threshold, that's imports 1.5 million, exports 450,000, you do have to do a thing called an intrastat for movements to and from the EU, and that involves a tariff code. So you need your tariff code even within Europe today. You need your tariff code for shipments to anywhere else today. When we end the transition on the 1st of January next year, we will need a tariff code for every single shipment, regardless of whether we're a sole trader, whether we're VAT registered, whether we're a huge conglomerate. It won't make any difference at all. Every item will need a tariff code. And that's not one per invoice, that's one per item, one per commodity, because the tariff code describes in detail exactly every item that is being shipped. So you need to have your systems capable of choosing a tariff code and choosing the one to match every commodity on your documentation for that consignment. Now remember that at that time, the 1st of January next year, the UK will cease to use the European Union list of tariff codes. We will have our own list. It is not yet published. The one that was published earlier this year was for no-deal Brexit, and we haven't got a no-deal Brexit. We went through with a deal, we have a transition period, and there will be a new UK list of tariff codes for the 1st of January with their own duty rates, so that when goods are imported to the UK from anywhere, including the European Union, those will be the duty rates that apply to those products. So having a tariff code today is very, very important. Having one for the 1st of January that is correct according to UK rules is essential. At that point, I'll throw open the floor to any questions.
Right, well, at the moment we don't have any indications of questions, but I'm going to unmute everybody. So please, if you'd like to ask questions, say your name and then ask your question. You are now all unmuted. Has anybody got a question? No, not at the moment. Well, can I ask a question then? Sorry, was that somebody asking a question? No? I will mute you all for a moment and ask another question. So very often we see the invoices we receive with goods coming into the country, as if we are the importer. These invoices often have the commodity or tariff codes listed from our suppliers. Can we simply use those when we do our own import entries?
No, because those are going to be the tariff numbers, the commodity numbers chosen by the exporter in the foreign country according to their list of codes. They might not be on HS 2017, and they will certainly have additional digits that are specific to their own country. So the number that they put on there, well, it might give you a clue in that the first 6 digits might head you in the right direction if we are sharing the same iteration of HS code as them, but it could be completely different. And the other problem is that interpretation plays a part in this, as well as the rules. There is interpretation, because some people would describe things, I don't know if some of you have laptops, I'm using one now, that actually has a cover which has a keyboard in it. So when I flap down the cover off of the screen, it's actually a keyboard. Now, if you saw that sold separately, is that a keyboard or is it a laptop cover? Those are two different tariff codes with two different duty rates and two different VAT rates, probably. So you see, local interpretation also plays a part. So they might have made the designation that this was a laptop cover and have shipped it with a tariff code from their country that says so. We might designate that as being a laptop cover. And therefore, we've got a different code completely, as a keyboard, and we've got a different tariff code completely for keyboards. And that is our interpretation of that piece of equipment that is crossing the border. We therefore need to make sure that the tariff code, the commodity number we use as an importer, is suitable for our country of import, not the one that's the country of export. So I'm sorry, the answer to your question is no. You've got to ignore it mostly and pick one of your own. That's certainly what customs expect you to have done.
Thank you for that. We're running out of time, so unless anybody else has got another question, just one other very quick question. What are the penalties for getting the tariff code wrong? Is it simply that we might pay too much duty?
No. When customs audit you, as they will do eventually, they audit everyone eventually, then they will test how you arrived at the tariff code you used, either as exporter or importer. Now, if you use the wrong code, yes, you may well have, as an importer, paid the wrong amount of duty and VAT. That in itself is a civil offence. But you would also be expected to show how you arrived at that. This is not meant to be, well, I opened the list and I ran my finger down it and I thought that was closest. You're supposed to demonstrate how you use the rules and the local interpretation to find the right code. And then you're supposed to demonstrate that you gave that code to the people like your freight agent who's doing the customs entry, and that you checked they used the one you told them to use. Human error can always come in there. And then they're going to say, well, why did you choose such a silly code? And if you say, well, it just said bucket, so I assumed it was plastic, they're going to actually give you a penalty. So it's not just the wrong duties and taxes, there is actually a penalty to be applied, which can be £250 up to £2,500 per mistake. And if you've been doing the mistake for a long time, those go out the window and something rather more severe comes in, because that's considered to be complete negligence. Because all importers and exporters are supposed to know about tariff codes, how to select a tariff code, and to check that they're getting the right one, and have evidence of that for customs. So it can be quite a heavy financial penalty if we've been getting it wrong for a while.
Right, thank you for that. Just in the last few minutes, I'm going to unmute everybody again and give you another chance to ask any questions. You may ask any questions you have now.
I don't have a question, but I'd like to say it's been a very good a good presentation. I've learnt quite a bit.
Thank you. I'm glad for that.
Thank you very much. Has anybody got a question or would like to make a comment? If not, we'll say thank you very much. I will now stop the recording.